Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Wifey Vibe. I'm your host, Cara McCarran, and we're going to continue with having some amazing guys on the show because, I love to hear their perspective on everything. Today we have Tanner. I don't want to mispronounce your last name. So I've said it in my head 1,000 times, but you said it different. And I was like, maybe I'm going to let him say it. Um, so you go
It's
ahead.
Chidester.
Thank you.
Chidester.
Chidester. Okay. And I have followed him for a while. And we kind of chat on Facebook, and I saw a post that he posted about reading The Way of the Superior Man. And of course, I was like, okay, this is somebody I want to have on the show to have a conversation around masculine energy. And even today, was it today? I don't know if you posted the red pill, like you did a
Yeah, it's
screenshot
like
of your
it's called
books.
the Rational Male, which is like very red pill. It's like
Yes.
awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So, welcome to the show. Thank you. I know you're crazy busy. I deeply appreciate you coming and chatting with me. I know it's probably not like the norm of what you want to talk about, but it's going to be
No,
good anyway.
I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me, and I'll do my best to deliver some value.
Perfect. So, the first thing that I kind of want to know is how you like just something basic. How did you end up reading this book? Like, what was sort of the catalyst to getting you to the point where you're like, oh, that's a book I want to read. I've read it, ladies, gentlemen. If you've not read it, I think it's a wicked book, especially for women to understand men better. But tell me a little bit about kind of like how you got to that stage, and then
Yeah,
maybe what you think about the book.
sure. So just as a background, I grew up very conservative, religious. My dad is essentially a pastor, so very religious. And once I started getting older and I realized, I want to have this elevated lifestyle, I started making a lot of money. I think I got into a mindset probably later in my 20s where, it's like, hey, I worked my ass off to get to this place, and then everyone's telling me to grow up and settle down, and, like, why? Like, I just got here. Um, I didn't date. I dated a little bit in my 20s, but I mostly was growing my businesses. I didn't really date seriously till I was 27. And I've dated on and off pretty much the same woman, and we've always had a really good relationship, but I've always just had a hard time, I guess, settling down, right? Like, and
Mm-hmm.
I just always wondered why, like, why can't I do this? Or is there something wrong with me? Or is there something wrong with her or something like that? And so I've just really been on a journey the last couple of years where I've been really reading and learning, trying to kind of understand that part of myself. And that's actually what led me down that path of reading the book. And that's why I'm
Mm-hmm.
reading a bunch of other books right now. I think I've actually come to more of the conclusion recently, like maybe a week ago. But I've been looking for like my answer for the last couple years. And the first few years, I think I had a hard time because I really judged myself. I had a lot of,
Right.
I guess you say, guilt and shame. Like, why do I kind of feel like this?
Yeah.
But now I've gotten more at peace with where I'm at, and I think I came to more of a like a logical conclusion, which is how I think. I'm a very logical thinker. But
Yeah.
that's to answer your question. That's why I was like, hey, I need to read that book. And like Ego is the Enemy, I think is a good book. And I am reading The Rational Male, which is like it's very red pill, but I like seeing all sides of the coin because I think that's good to build your beliefs. I think when you only stick to like
Yeah.
one side of the tree, I guess so to say, or the fence, like you can't learn that much. But that's my perspective, at least. Could be completely wrong, but that's my perspective.
So when you say so for the people who don't understand the red pill blue pill reference, talk say a little bit because I looked at that book really quickly, the one that was on the far right book. I guess it was on the left of your post, but and I had a
Yeah.
quick look at it. When you say red pill, kind of explain what that means to you because I know there's a bunch of people that red
Yeah.
or blue, but tell me a
Yeah.
bit more about that.
I think it depends on who's giving the definition, but to me, red pill is women are more looked at as maybe opportunistic,
Mm-hmm.
or they're looking for the right guy who has the right amount of resources, and so it's kind of viewed more as like a game, right? Versus usually when you're seeing love and relationship books, I think they view it more as like, hey, do your values align, and like how can you serve that person? Red pill is almost, it kind of seems, hey, girls are kind of bad and they're just looking to like get what they can get. And so you kind of have to play this game and stay in a certain frame or they're not going to respect you. Um, so I don't know if that's the best definition, but it just kind of views it more as a game and maybe as
Right.
women are trying to take versus like a normal outlook might be, hey, you got to find the right girl and find the right values. And it's a little bit of a softer tone.
So one of the things, thank you for that explanation. I mean, I think one of the things that, because we're obviously you're much younger than I am, and so I've been married for 23 years. We've had some separations in that marriage because there's a lack of polarity, honestly, right? Like that's I think the biggest key to masculine and feminine energy in dating is polarity. That has to be there, otherwise you're just friends. Um, so in your dating, so what you're 32? Am I making is my
32,
math
32
math
now.
right?
Yes,
Okay.
ma'am. Uh-huh.
Not bad.
Uh-huh.
I have a daughter who's gonna be 28 this month. I can't even handle that. It's
Nice.
wild. She has a social media company too, so it's like Apple doesn't fall far from the tree.
Yeah, there you go.
But I think and this and I'll sort of address that because what she says about the dating pool right now is that there's a lot of guys who are very much like 50-50 and they're not so like there's three categories of guys. The guys who've been burned who are like, fuck that, I'm not paying for anybody's anything. I'm buying you a coffee if you're lucky. And then you have the category of guys who are like, let's do everything 50-50. And so what happens is that incites a female to go into her masculine, any way you slice it, doesn't matter what age. And then
Right.
you've got the dudes that are like more traditional and recognize the value of a woman who isn't there to take advantage of them, but who's there to, because I think the feminine is really meant to give you peace. Like if I'm your wife, I'm meant to give you peace. That's what I'm here to bring you. I can still make money. I can still have my independence, all the things, but I'm not here to aggravate my spouse on purpose just to be an asshole. And I think a lot of women still don't, well, most women don't understand that, right? Sorry, ladies. But so there's kind of like three versions. When you think about the guys that you know or yourself, what kind of where do you fall in that in those three categories? You're like you're getting coffee, bitch. That's it, or what?
Yeah.
Not to be rude, but
No, no. I mean, for me, I would say, I wouldn't say 50-50, but it would either be definitely not the not getting them anything, but it's for me, it's more in the middle or to the right hand side. I mean,
right,
when I take someone out, I'm gonna get like I'm gonna pay for it. I just think that's kind of normal. I think for me though, in a long-term relationship, what I've been looking for is I want to feel more like it's a teammate versus
right,
a cheerleader. And I think that's more abnormal, just to be fair to the listeners. I think most men, they do prefer a cheerleader, or I think the average guy does. I think for me, just I don't know if it's because I'm very ambitious or how I was raised, or I could go through that all day. I don't really know, but I do know that I've really enjoyed dating when I feel the girl's kind of in it with me, or she has similar interests versus they're kind of just looking for someone to take care of them. And I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying from
right,
my perspective, I think most of my friends are going to fall in kind of that category where they're usually 100% handling everything, and
right.
there's nothing wrong with that. When I look at a good example to maybe give you like a teammate would be like when I look at like Alex or Layla or
Mm-hmm.
Mosey. I'm not saying necessarily that's what I want, that exact dynamic, but to me, she's in it with him. Like she's like
Yep,
actually part of what he's doing. And I know for him, that's important. And
yep.
so I think I'm more abnormal where that's more what I like. But I think the average guy would definitely be over here. I don't know too many guys who would get that crazy. I mean, to me, it's
There
like
are a lot of them out there, honestly.
yeah,
Like
that's
it's
interesting to me. I
wild.
think yeah, I think on a first date, if you're that concerned, just make it a small one. Like
Right,
just make it small. But I just don't think that's a really great way to like start off a relationship or like to impress a girl because ultimately it is competition. And so the way
right.
I view it is there's gonna be guys who will do that. So if you don't do that, you're just kind of putting yourself behind the eight ball. With that being said, once you get to know a girl, you can start having those types of conversations and maybe set boundaries or rules or whatever. But I think on a first date, if you've asked like it's just common sense to me to just like take care of it.
Yeah.
I don't feel it does you any favors not to.
And it's funny because I think there's so much talk around the high value man and high value woman and all this like that's very kitschy
Yeah.
right now and everyone's like and I know your background. I know you've done really well and you've probably got to be discerning about who you let in to your world, period, right? Like that's I'd be surprised if you weren't kind of vetting people on that level. But there's definitely like I would consider myself a high achiever for sure. Like I don't quit. I've been an entrepreneur since I was like 20. I had my first business when I was 21 or something. Event planning, and I loved it. Didn't make money, but I friggin' loved it. It was the best thing ever. So I think and I want to chat a bit about that because there's a dynamic that happens if a so alpha, masculine, divine, whatever we want to call it, a guy who understands himself, who's in his man, in his masculine frame, we'll call it. Where if you find women, because we can sometimes out alpha or try to out alpha the man. And that's where I think a lot of trouble happens because, like, when you think of Alex and Layla, like, do they have pissing contests at home sometimes because they're both equally ambitious? Does she, and oftentimes in those relationships, the woman actually, like Cody Sanchez, I don't know if you follow her, but when she
Mm.
talks about her husband, she's like, after hours, I don't have any, I don't speak. Like, I'm basically just a little kid and I know I'll get fed and I know I'll be safe and that's it. So talk a little bit about, like, have you had that experience where you've met somebody who is as ambitious as you are, but knows how to turn it off when it's time to be your girlfriend again? Or if that's something that you're
Yeah.
just discovering now.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, that's definitely what I'm most attracted to. I mean, I'm in Miami, for example, there's a million beautiful girls out here. And there was actually a book I read. I think it'd be a great book for people to read. It's actually by a therapist named Dr. Orion Tarabon. It's called The Value of Others. And that was a very interesting book because what he essentially says is he kind of downplays love and says people don't get married for love, they get married for equal value exchange. And so during the book, he's talking about the sexual marketplace value and
Yep.
talking about that. And that book actually, I think it pointed out to me that, in the past, if I would have an issue meaning like if I thought we should break up, whatever, I would always just be like, man, like why do I feel like I want to break up or I don't want to be with this girl if she's like such a great girl? And I think for me, at least what I've come to the conclusion so far is that I just didn't feel like the value was equal, meaning there's a million girls out there who would love a guy to take care of them and pay for everything and do all this stuff, and
Right.
that's great. And I have no issue doing it. But when you start talking about marriage, I think man, that's not, I don't know if that's like really the trade-off I'm looking for right now. And maybe as I get older,
Yeah.
I want kids, but maybe not right now. And I'm still really in my grind mode with my businesses and stuff like that. So I think I'm also mature enough to know that maybe, in 3, 5 years, like that could be it. But I think that was really eye-opening for me because instead of, wondering why I couldn't commit and I thought maybe I had like commitment issues, I think I just realized I just don't value the same things I value. And so
Right.
whenever it come down to it, I'd start having issues because I'm like, hey, I value building businesses and growing and I want to personally develop. And I kind of felt like I wanted someone to go on that path with me versus on average, I would say that the average woman, which isn't bad, it's just they're not really looking to do that because again, it is,
It's
I don't want
hard.
to say,
It's
yeah,
a hard
it's a
life.
little bit, yeah, and it's a little bit more, I don't think I ever dated masculine women, but it was more balanced. Like I don't think I would if you saw girls I dated, they look very feminine and they're very beautiful, but they kind of have a little bit of a go-getter attitude and
Right.
they work out and they do all those types of things, which it's I don't want to say it's masculine. I mean, maybe it is. Maybe it's a little bit masculine energy. So I think I'm a little bit more abnormal where I'm looking for a little bit more of a balance
Right.
because to me, when I see that, the value exchange in my eyes goes way up and I find them a lot more valuable because to me I'm going, man, like she could help me grow and she could help me build my empire. And that to me is kind of the phase I'm in right now. And that's at
Well,
least where I think I'm at. That's the conclusion I've come to. That
yeah.
could be completely wrong, but that's at least how I feel.
And the wild part is, like, over the next 10 or 15 years, you're going to totally morph into a whole bunch of different versions of yourself. And you'll be like, what the fuck was I talking about on that podcast? Or, yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly who you are and who you are at the core. And I think that's the beauty of growing. Like, every new iteration of myself, I'm looking back going, like, what? Who was that?
Yeah. And
Um,
I think that could be what makes relationships hard to an extent because as you get older, you change. And so, if that person doesn't change with you or they change differently, that at least is starting to make more sense to me where people might run into issues.
yep.
But I think ultimately people are looking for an equal exchange of value. And if they
Yeah.
feel out of alignment, that's where relationships end because they're thinking, I'm giving more than you're giving, and so it's not a fair exchange. And
Yep.
I do think when things get hard or when the kind of, dopamine wears off from the relationship and you're at the honeymoon phase, I think that stuff does matter. Maybe in the beginning it doesn't, but I do think over time, no one wants to feel taken advantage of or like they're giving
Right.
more than the other person. And so I'm not saying I don't know what what a woman would have to do for me. Like if she wanted me to pay for everything, I wouldn't mind. But then there's got to be something else they're
Right.
bringing to the table that really equates that value. Because if not, it just starts feeling like this to me. Like it's
Yep.
just way up here and I'm way down here. If that makes sense.
It 100%. And I think women your age right now, and I would say arguably into my demographic as well, because a lot of women my age, this is an interesting fact, ladies that are listening who are my age range, when you start to, and this might bore the shit out of you, Tanner, but tough shit. No, I'm just kidding.
You're, you're good.
But like at this stage, when a woman is going through perimenopause, our hormones are really fucked, right? And we all of a sudden are like, who's this guy that I've been living with for the last 30 years? Like, get him the F out of my zone. Because that hormonally, we start to look at men differently. So there's a lot of single women at the between 40 and 50 and beyond, but there's a ton of single women at this age who are also like, they're doing the work, they've got the money, but they're still very masculine. They're trying to attract these men, and the men are very feminine energy, and they can't figure out why there's no polarity, why they don't want to have sex. Like, the biggest underlying reason for any couple to not be having sex is a lack of polarity. And that only happens when there's a masculine and a feminine and they're swapped. So if the guy's super feminine, because a lot of times, what you'll see is the feminine or the masculine men, the men will be looking up to them and groveling and putting them on a pedestal. And I can tell you categorically, there's no woman who's like, oh, I love it when he looks like at me that way. All of them are like, why is he such a pussy? Like, truly, that's the conversation behind closed doors, telling you now, because we don't want to be in that. We don't want to be alpha. You could be alpha and I could be right underneath you, but there has to still be a hierarchy within a relationship like that, because someone's got to be in charge, and it can't be both of us. So I love how you're recognizing, like, you want to have somebody who's ambitious, but then on the off time, she still has to be a squishy, delicious, juicy
Yeah.
woman, because
Yeah.
you couldn't manage that, right? Like if you had boss babe, and I always say boss babe and passenger princess because that's what's current right now. But like, men like at your level love to have the boss babe, but if that was her mo all the time, you'd get tired of it. So
Yep.
that's the challenge for a dude right now, I think, is to find that combo of, like, when can she turn into the princess, and like when I was coaching, I would tell my clients, like, hit the light switch on your door before you leave the office and tell yourself, now I'm in my feminine, I'm not in charge anymore, I don't have to be a boss anymore, let your husband lead. Because that's where the tricky part becomes for the couple, is like, if you're trying to lead and she's trying to lead, and then like, who's in charge now, right?
Yeah. I agree. And I think what I'm looking for is definitely harder to find because finding a
Mhm.
woman who is kind of ambitious, but also is also very feminine is trickier. It's
Yeah.
much harder to find. I think the stage I'm at in my life, though, and at least when I've talked to my dad, is, I was like, Dad, it just right now, just getting married and paying all the bills and having kids and more responsibility. Because I'm getting up early, go to the gym, I'm running the businesses. So I think to me, it just felt I'm just adding more responsibility. And
Right.
yes, I get a partner, but that to me wasn't enough to get married, right? It was enough
Yep.
to like date and have a relationship, but like then when I talk about marriage, I'm like, man, it just didn't feel equal, at least at the time for me. But maybe as I get older, that will change. But I do think for the average guy, they're not looking for that. I would say most of my friends are very much looking for, just a very like submissive, feminine girl who like makes
That
them
gets
feel good.
boring. Yeah, like I feel like that'd be so boring eventually, right? I mean,
Yeah, I mean, it is for me, but I think again,
right,
I do think I'm not that standard guy. I think I'm
right.
in the if it's the 80-20 rule, I think I'm in the 20% that uh like that. Most of my guy friends who are very successful, they're in great shape, all that stuff, they usually are
Right.
dating the type of girl that like I'm describing that I'm not super interested in right now. But I think by being open-minded to that, it makes it an interesting conversation versus like the way I think is right and the way you think is wrong.
Yeah.
I definitely think most guys would probably disagree with me, but I just think where I'm at in my life right now, I just feel what's the reason for me to add all this responsibility to my
Yeah.
life if like the it doesn't really help my business and it's not really helping me
Right.
develop and that might be a bad outlook, but I think that's where I'm at the moment.
Yeah. And I think like my daughters will say the same, and I would say the same, um, when it comes, like, the reverse is true as well, right? Like, if I'm making the money and I'm taking care of my bills and I'm cooking and I'm managing and da da da, like, a man is really, now things are really screwed up, granted, in the way that we operate with each other, men and women, for sure. But like, what's the value is that man bringing? Like, if that man's just coming and, like, being a draining my energy and draining my bank account and draining my time, and I can do all my shit on my own. And I'll tell honestly, that's kind of how I've looked at it in my lifetime, where I'm like, this is not supposed to be more work. A man coming into my life should be a
Less work.
compliment.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I don't disagree with you at all. I think that it's, and maybe that's why people like us are people like us, because we look at it differently. And it's
Yeah.
not, I mean, a woman really, at the childbearing age, she's staying home with kids and like that's her job. Okay, cool. But like, there's just something about, and I've done that. I've stayed at home with my kids for a number of years. And I just, honestly, I'll tell you right now, I love my children, but fuck. I was like, I got to
Yeah.
go build something. Like, this is boring. You kind of can only do it for so long before you're like, okay.
Yeah. I think a better example for me too is, and this was something I had to think about is, if you have a wife and she cooks and cleans and all that, that's amazing. And like, I super appreciate it. And I love that. But because of where I'm at financially, it's like I can just pay someone 40
Yep.
grand each. They can do that too. Or, like if I want kids, great. But if I'm not ready for kids right now, that's not as big of a value exchange because
Right.
that's not something I want right now. So I think for me, at least the way I view it now is what attracts me a lot is if I meet a woman where I'm like, she can actually add value to
Right.
like business or like intellectual conversations, or like they're at the same drive where they want to read a lot of books and personally develop. And because to me, I'm like, that's bringing value to me versus, yes, like they're nice to be around and they make me feel good and they're very feminine, but it's like, I don't need like a cleaner and I don't need someone to
Right.
cook my food. And I'm not saying that in a derogatory way. I'm just
No,
saying
not
for
at
me,
all.
yeah, for me, it's just I make a lot of money. Like that doesn't bring me any value whatsoever. And
Right.
so again, like I think it varies per person and relationship, but I think the key thing is like you just have to find that equal value exchange. And when you do, that's where things feel really great because you feel like you're both really benefiting from each other's life versus it's a one, size fits all. And like going back to your example, especially as a woman, I think I don't know. I don't resonate with guys who are not driven. Like it just, I don't know.
Right.
I've just always been that way. And so as a woman, especially I've met female entrepreneurs where, if they're the provider in the relationship, I mean, it just seems tough because they're kind of like basically the masculine guy and the guy's the girl. And it just
Yep.
it just feels like it just feels off because
It does.
she's working all day and then, she's kind of taking care of her boyfriend. I've seen that a few times and to each their own, but I just was like, I don't see how that's gonna shake out
No,
well.
it doesn't. And that was my experience in my relationship. And we're working through a lot of pieces right now. I mean, it's 25 years of history. So we're working through a lot of those pieces where I definitely am the ambitious and driver of the family. And now in the last couple of years, or maybe even just year, he's gone, okay, well, because I've said, listen, I'm not going to continue to try to out alpha you because that's exhausting. I don't want to do that. So now there's conversation around that. But I think it's part of your DNA, whether you're driven or not. I think like I read a bit of your background and you said you were bullied. Things like that really do push. I came from a group home. I want to start group homes when I sell this company. That's the goal, is to start. I'm actively working on it now, but start a group home for kids because I went to one and it was terrible. And I want to, so I'm driven no matter what. Like it doesn't, I'm always building something. And so it's interesting, like when you talk about the women that it just it does there's a certain level of conversation that you can't have with someone who's not driven, and that can get really redundant in a relationship. So I think it's important that you're aware of it, because a lot of guys aren't. Like they'll just think, oh, it's, the fact that you're self-reflecting, I love. And ladies, like, just so you know, we're not the only ones that do the work. Guys do the work too on themselves and understanding where they're at. Because I think a lot of ladies are like, oh, we're doing all the work and the guys aren't doing shit. Well, of course they are.
Yeah. No, I mean, you have to want to change. For me, where a lot of my desire to grow came from was I mean, I was with an amazing girl. I mean, I still think she's amazing and we dated for a long time. And um, I just always would feel guilty that I couldn't pull the trigger. And, my
Mm,
parents were like, I don't get it. My friends wouldn't get it. And I just like, man, I don't know. I just, for whatever reason, I can't get it. And I think ultimately now that I've kind of stepped back and continue, it took me a long time because sometimes you don't get the answer right away. I felt I
right.
was stumbling around for a couple of years, but you keep looking, eventually I think you'll find it. And I think for me, once I sat back and I started dating other women, I just remember thinking, I go, man, there's no way I would ever commit to these girls. And they're not bad girls, they're great girls, but I just was like, they're just not going to bring anything to my life. Like it's going to be 100-0,
Yeah.
the way I viewed it, right? And so to me, I just realized what do I value? And when I started thinking about it, like, I still just value my businesses. I value personal development. Like, I
Yeah.
still want to push. I still want to grow. I don't care about, having kids at this moment. And
Yeah.
so when I meet a woman who that's where her head was, it wasn't that she's a bad person or anything like that. I just was like, yeah, this isn't a fair trade. Like, I'm gonna be taking care of everything. You're gonna have kids, but I don't really want kids right now. So that doesn't
Right. So it didn't make
just think I
sense to
had
you.
to, yeah, I think I had to understand that about myself. So what's nice is when you finally, you start understanding who you are, where you're at, instead of judging myself,
Yep.
I was like, it's okay. Like versus before, you're going through torment because you're trying to figure out what's, wrong with you, right? Because people are telling you there's something wrong with you. But I think I just realized for me, that's just not a place I'm at right now. And so I have to be okay with that
Right.
and either have that conversation with whoever I date, or I'm like, you need to go date a guy who's at that place, that you're looking for.
Yeah.
Anyways, but I could go in circles with it, but yeah, it took me, it took
No,
me many,
it's
so
important to have this conversation, I think, for guys to hear it too, because like even as an entrepreneur, I know you were in school and you left school to go do your entrepreneur shit, your entrepreneur tangs.
yeah.
And even that, like for 20 years, I thought there was something fundamentally wrong with me because I didn't want to go to university. All my friends went to university and I was like job after job after job after job. And I was like, wait a minute, I actually love business and I want to build something. And I think the same goes for this topic. Like when you recognize having kids, let me tell you, like you need to be damn ready. Like your brain will never be your own again the second that baby's out,
Yeah.
as the dad or as the mom. I have never had, my thoughts have never been my own for 28 years, ever. And nobody tells you that. Like right now, I'm like Sydney, Olivia, Amelia, Sydney, Olivia, Amelia. Like I can have this conversation and be thinking, are they okay? Are they? And like that's something that parents never talk about. And I think it's important because this is the blue pill. It's like go to school, start to get a job, find a girl, get married, have kids, blah, blah, blah. And like we're not built that way. And I think it's important to be like okay with that. And I love that you're owning that shit because a lot of guys your age are not. They're still thinking, what the fuck's wrong with me? Why don't I want to do this? Why don't I want to do that? When it
The,
doesn't matter why, you just don't. And I think it's
the,
cool.
the best way to get to that place though, so being transparent, the reason I think looking back, the reason I felt guilty or shameful is when I was in the relationship, I would maybe have those feelings, but then I wouldn't give 100% to the relationship. So
Right.
the relationship would end. I didn't know if it was because I didn't try
Right.
my best or is because the way I thought. So something I did this last time is one of the things I was saying to myself on a daily basis is I would say, I'm the world's best boyfriend. So when I would get in like tough situations, I would really like I would handle
Embody
it really
that.
well. Yeah. And so what happened is that like as the relationship like was progressing and I was like, I'm gonna do everything I can to be the best boyfriend so that by the end, if I still feel the same way I feel, I won't have regrets. And that's exactly what happened. And so when I walked away and I still had those same thoughts about stuff I've shared with you, I'm like, oh, I don't know, like I don't feel comfortable, this and that. I was able to let go of that guilt and shame because like there was nothing else I could have done. And that actually helped me get to where I'm at now because guilt and shame usually comes from regret. Regret comes from
Right.
lack of effort. So I think a lot of people, they don't actually know the answer. They can't get to it because they didn't actually try their best in the relationship. And so my advice would be to anyone listening is if you are unsure why you feel a certain way or like if this is the right person or the wrong person, the only way, in my opinion, to get there is you have to give your absolute best in the relationship. Like, and everyone knows what that is. Like,
Mm-hmm.
if you're doing your absolute best. So then if it doesn't work out or you still feel that way, you left it all on the table. It's the same thing in business. It's the same thing in
Yep.
sports. So that I think that was part of my issue for years is whenever it would get hard, I would do something that maybe I wasn't cheating or maybe I wasn't doing something wrong, but I did something that I knew that's not really benefiting the relationship or it might be something she wouldn't actually want me to do.
Right.
And so that's kind of the way I learned the hard way, I guess you could say, and it took
Yep.
me a long time.
That's amazing. And again, like your self-awareness, obviously, I mean, you're in personal development, so you understand it. And again, a lot of people don't. So I love how self-aware you are. When you talk about well, we haven't talked about it, but Mike, I'm curious to know sort of what your thoughts are on masterminding or being in men's groups or that type of like having peers. Cause I know honestly, entrepreneurship for me has always been super lonely. Because I think differently. I think in huge numbers and crazy goals and all this. And the women that I've been around don't like, they're just happy with their life and that's cool for them. But that's so I always find it sort of challenging to find peers. But I benefit deeply from being around women who maybe know more about this stuff than I do and who can teach me how to like chill the fuck out sometimes and not be so and like just talk business all day. So when it comes to like your peer group or men that you look up to in this category, do you have anybody that you kind of think, okay, this guy's he's kind of emulating what I'd like to have in the future? Or is it your dad? Like, what, give me a sense of who you kind of look up to in this area.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think someone I look up to, he's an older guy. His name's Steve Hardison.
Okay.
He's helped me quite a bit. He's been married to his wife for, I don't know, forever. And um, he's kind of like a pretty popular mindset coach, pretty expensive guy. But yeah, he helped me a lot with understanding that a lot of issues that I would see in other women was really just an issue with myself. It was something like I would judge
Which I
myself.
hate when that shit happens.
Yeah.
Dang it.
So I would say him. I really respect my dad. I mean, I don't agree with my dad on like maybe necessarily exactly how he's lived his life, but my dad always worked really hard and he always respected my mom and he's never cheated on her and he's always taken good care of her. So I respect him for that. Outside of that, to be honest, I was a little disappointed when I'd look around.
Mm,
Meaning when I would talk to very affluent men. I think first off, it's not spoken about very much. And I think part of it is it's just very private. So when I would talk to different men, I won't mention any names, obviously, but I'd say, hey, what do you do as you get older, as a guy? Like, I mean,
yeah.
even if you get married, I'm sure you're attracted to other women, and like, how do you play that? So some guys would say, oh, you just deal with it. And I was
Yep.
like, I respect that, but I was like, man, that kind of the way when someone says deal with it, I'm like, man, that kind of sounds shitty.
Yep.
Some guys would say they just cheat, and I was like, that doesn't resonate with me at all.
Yep.
But they would do it, and that's what they would tell me. And then, some guys would go down the path. They're like, oh, you just got to have, two, three, four, five, anything more than one. And so it was a little, I think I was a little disappointed because I don't think some people, I think, like have a perception of someone out there, and it's completely incorrect because I actually had a conversation with them.
Right.
I would never bring it up publicly or anything because there's nothing to gain from that and it's
Right.
completely private. But I think I was a little bit disappointed because I think a lot of guys won't openly talk about it. And then the ones who did talk to me privately, some of their answers were a little bit disappointing. So I think that's why I've been on a journey on my own a little bit because ultimately, something that Steve actually said to me is one time I was asking him what to do. And he was like, well, you should do this or you should do that. And he kind of played it out, but then he said, it doesn't really matter what I say anyways, because you're not going to do what I say because like someone can't convince you what to do. It has to come from
Yep.
within. It has to be your idea. And so that's really what I've just been trying to focus on. And so I actually prefer now currently with the relationship category, at least, I actually prefer reading books because I get the viewpoint, but
Right.
I am allowed to make my own decision versus when someone gives you their view, it's obviously biased, right?
Yep.
Meaning
It's a projection.
for whatever reason, they have a bias around it. And so I just know how my brain works. My brain goes, yeah, like, that guy said that, but, he doesn't make as much money as me. Or, yeah, that guy's got, this, but, she's not that pretty. So she doesn't, like,
Yeah.
you'll make all these justifications to basically push away whatever they tell you, anyways.
Yeah.
So I think after I went around the merry-go-round a few times with that, I actually had a very similar experience with religion where I'd ask a pastor and he'd say this, and I mean, no one could agree. And I'm going, I'm more confused than when I started this thing.
Right.
And, so, anyways, I guess the point I'm just trying to make is those are the guys I look up to, but I also now try to find my own answers, and that's been a lot more beneficial. And when you feel convicted in something, it just you can just tell and you can just live it much better than when it's someone else's idea. It's like your parents
Right.
making you go to church versus you're choosing to go to church. It's
Yep.
just very
Perfect segue. I was going to ask you what does faith have to do with all of this? I mean, I'm not religious. I was raised Ukrainian Catholic, but I'm I would say I'm just starting to have a relationship that's very different now with God. And for the last 25 years, there's been really no relationship. But how much of your faith do you think about, like, when it comes to looking to connect with somebody? Is that a piece that's important to you? Um, because oftentimes what I've heard in the Way of the Superior Man, it talks about mission and having, something bigger than
Purpose.
yourself. Um, I find that if, because a woman typically, the feminine is looking to the masculine as the leader, right? Like, you're the top of the heap. I may be close, like we've said, I might be ambitious and all the things, but I'm still like, I need to know Tanner's going to make sure I get from point A to point B and not crash us. Like, I have to trust and feel safety and all those things. Like, that's how you put a woman in her feminine, is feeling safe emotionally, physically, financially, like, make sure that you're not, because as soon as a woman feels like she has to make money, that's when you're losing the feminine quality instantly. As soon as that happens, because she goes into fight or flight. But when it comes to faith, what I've heard is a lot of times that's why men will have this relationship with God, because that's their hierarchy. That's their big papa. That's their thing that they can look up to and sort of go, okay, now I can just release it to the universe or to God or whatever that they call it. So there's that hierarchy. What are your thoughts on that? Does that resonate with you? Do you have something that you believe in that helps you to feel safe and secure and all those things?
Yeah, that's a good question. I grew up pretty religious, and so I kind of did that until I was, I want to say 18 or 19, and then I started falling off. And I think I could go into a whole story, but I won't. But I think the key thing for me was I had a really hard time wrapping my head around, if you do these things, you're good. If you don't do these things, you're not good.
Yeah.
For better or worse. That just has always been a hard thing for me to wrap my head around. So I wouldn't say I'm super religious at the moment, but actually, when I worked with Steve Hardison, that's the first time I met a mentor who could logically explain to me, I guess, more of the power. I don't want to call it affirmations. He calls it your document, but like how you can kind of create your reality. And so maybe a quick story I could share that would paint the example is Steve said one time he went to a prison and he can't really see or hear that well. So he had his phone up like this. He was FaceTiming, but the inmate thought he was recording him. So the inmate got
Oh,
pissed, took a rock, threw it at his car, broke his windshield. It's a really expensive car. And Steve was really nice to the guy and was like, dude, I'm so sorry, XYZ, and it totally de-escalated. The average person would have probably cussed the guy out or got him in trouble with the guards or something.
yeah.
And the point he was trying to make, and to me, is I said, well, Steve, like, how can you change the way you feel? Like, if someone punches me in the face, I'm gonna get mad. The lesson he was trying to teach me is if you decide how you're gonna act beforehand, that actually will create your reality. So he's like, Tanner, the reason I was able to be calm in that situation is I'd already told myself how I would act in those situations if they ever happened. And so that actually has been probably the closest thing I felt to godlike or like close to God, because when he taught me these things, I started, instead of viewing people as like, my team sucks, my girlfriend sucks, these people suck, what's wrong with them? I started realizing it was something I was telling myself. And so when I would get in a tough situation, even if someone started it, if I said stuff like, I'm always kind or I'm the world's best boyfriend or whatever, what would happen is I would act different. And then it would immediately, I could see people shift to match
Yeah.
me. And I was like, oh shit, like I can actually, it's almost like I'm creating this, right? Like I'm
Yep.
actually can control what's happening. It almost felt like a video game, right? Versus before it was like I'm just reacting. Like I would just like they throw something at me, I throw something at them, or they yell at me, I
Right.
yell at them. So hopefully I answered your question, but I think that's probably the closest I felt to like maybe something godlike where I've actually seen that change in my life and I've seen things change in my life as I've done better to do that. And when I
Hmm.
go away from maybe rehearsing or saying those things, I notice I don't perform as well, or like I'll act in a way that I'm not proud of.
Yep.
But in terms of like just straight up religion, like there's just nothing it's just not a huge part of my
Connecting
life.
with. Yeah.
No.
A-
No.
And I think that, like, and I thank you for your honesty about it, because I think a lot of
Sure.
people think, and even Ken, like my husband, he's on the spectrum, so he's Asperger's, so it's really super challenging. Because they're very logical in their thinking. It's like logically none of what most people say makes sense to them. And so for him, I'm always like, if you don't feel like you have something, and now he's really connecting with energy, and he would do a lot of Dr. Joe Dispenza stuff, which is like 5D shit and like energy, right? Everything's vibration.
Yeah.
Like, and that's kind of what it sounds like you're talking about. You change your vibration in that moment, and then all of a sudden the whole thing changes because you've
Yeah.
changed your paradigm in that moment.
Well, yeah, like so for example, I'd be in a relationship and maybe she would do something and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, like don't you get it? Like I've had such a long day. I've been up since 5 a.m. Don't you understand like it'd be that type of mindset."
Right.
But when I shifted, for example, I would start saying, "I'm the world's best boyfriend." What would happen is it's not that I would feel different in the moment. I still get pissed, but what would happen is that thought would come to my head and I was like, the world's best boyfriend wouldn't do that.
Right.
So then it would change. And usually would happen is I go over and I'd like hug her. I'm like, hey, I've had a long day. You didn't do anything. And then like you could kind of feel her calm
Yep.
down. And
100%.
it was really cool to see because that's how you actually change how you act. Because I think a lot of us, it's normal to get upset. It's normal to get disappointed or frustrated. But if you're if you're not putting those thoughts into your head, then you're just kind of getting whatever the world puts out, right? Like the music you listen to, what you hear at the gym, what people say to you. So I kind of view as like you're like a program and you
Yep.
can tell yourself how you want to think. And so that to me has been the closest thing I've ever done where I was like, wow, that actually works. And it
Yep.
sounds so simple, but your words become your thoughts become your actions become your life. So if you can change what you say, then that's what you'll think about and then that's what you'll exhume. And so that's kind of been like the best thing I've found so far. I don't think it's anything crazy, but
No, but
I couldn't
honestly,
wrap my head around it years ago.
it's the hardest. It's a very simple, because what all that is, and like when I've coached women and I've talked to many women about this, it's like in the moment, like if I'm being crazy and I know that I'm being crazy with the guy, in that moment, I can be like, you're being crazy, Cara. Like you're actually being completely nuts right now. That there's a moment there. It's the same as like when you have to get off your ass and go to the gym. That nobody wants to do. Very few people want to get up and go to the gym. But if it's that 5 second rule, Mel Robbins talks about it, where you've got 5 seconds to make a different decision. And in that moment, you've got 5 seconds to say, I'm the world's best boyfriend. And as soon you reprogram your mind to think, how does that guy, like for me, it's how does an 8 figure exit businesswoman behave? I'm not there yet. I'm getting very close. But if I'm embodying what she's doing a year from now, 2 years from now, and I'm acting like that, it's like the act as if, right? Act as though it's happening right now. It does change the energy. It for sure changes the dynamic of a relationship but it's hard because when you get either side whooped up and you're both really feeling the energy of the fight, you just want to be right. But in that moment, if you can stop and just be like, holy
Yeah.
shit, okay. And
But it's what's cool too, and sorry, I get excited about it because for years and years and years it just like was a part of my life that I didn't control very well. But like when you think about becoming the person you want to become, I used to think that you would actually feel different. And maybe you do at the
right,
highest level. Maybe that's like the last level. But I think a lot of just changing who you are is you feel exactly the same, but you just act differently. And then when you look
right.
back, that's where you're like actually proud of yourself. You're like, fuck, that guy was being a total asshole, but I handled it perfect. And that's where you feel
Yep.
proud, but where you feel guilt or shame is where you did exactly what you kind of felt in the moment. And I don't know, but maybe at the highest level of enlightenment, you actually get to a point where you don't even feel it. Like
Right.
someone would do something crazy and you're just like,
Right.
I don't know. But that was really cool for me to experience because I'm a very, motivated go-getter type guy. And as I would have more issues in my life, basically all Steve pointed out, he's like, dude, like you're choosing to feel that way. I was like, that makes no sense. If someone punches me, he's like, no, but dude, like he gave that example of the prison and he's like, you see how that guy started it, but because of
Right.
how I reacted, he completely changed how he was acting because he mirrored me. And I think that's a great way to view
Yep.
life. Is life is not it's a mirror, it's not a window, right? Like the
100%.
way people are acting is a direct reflection of you. And so if you change yourself, that'll change other people. Anyways, like I get
Yeah.
really into it now because
No,
it
listen,
it
this
really
is my
came
jam.
alive.
Yeah, because it's true. Like I read, I don't know if you've heard of Byron Katie. She does something called The
Yeah.
Work, and she's unbelievable. And it's the 4 questions, right? But I early on, like I came from alcoholic parents, and I would be so pissed about it for so many years, right? And then I was like, there's a judge your neighbor part that you can do, and it's really every single thing that anyone complains about is first a complaint about themselves. Like if I'm saying to you you're not affectionate enough, it's because I'm not. And
Mhm.
it's easy to say that because then it's on you. Well, Tanner, you're not affectionate enough, so fix it. Then when you turn it inside, and I've taught all my kids this, like every single negative thing that you don't like about a person is what you don't like about yourself. And once you get that raw and you start to look at it, okay, well, like that person's really loud. Okay, do I feel like I'm too loud sometimes?
Yeah.
Do I
Or
feel
it's
like I go ahead? Yeah.
it's like I'm sorry. It's the same thing with love, right? Like when you say like nobody loves me, it's like you have to create that. Like as you
Yeah.
create it, it'll happen. Or if you say I don't have any good friends, it's like you're probably not being a good friend. So whatever the
Yep.
thing is you want, you have to actually do it. And then as you do it, it creates the thing you want. And that took me a
Yep.
long time to understand.
Yeah.
Cool. When,
It is because that's life changing. That's when, because then all of a sudden it's 100% your responsibility. And that, I like that over it being like, I would much rather have control than you have control over me. Like,
yeah.
and I've said that 100, you see people who flip people off in the car and they grocery store and all the Karens and all this bullshit. And I'm like, give me 5 minutes with that person. They will see things totally differently. But like anytime there's a negative something that comes up in a relationship, that's a perfect opportunity for reflection, but it's friggin' hard because it requires you to put your ego down. And that's uncomfortable for most people. Like putting the ego down is not a comfortable thing to do. So we're close to wrapping it up. I want to respect your time. I hope this was fun for you. I hope you had a good time having this chat. Like again, I know it's not something that you're normally chatting about your business guy, but hopefully you had a good time. Is there any advice you'd have to give to guys your age that are maybe trying to kind of connect with their masculine energy and not because like let's be honest, a lot of guys nowadays are just douchey. They think masculine energy means being the loudest guy, making the most obnoxious jokes and slapping all the girls in the ass. Like you know the drill. Like that's just gross. No guy's ever going to get you in bed like that. Just FYI, guys. But like, is there any advice that you have to a young man who's like really just starting to see he wants to change and he wants to be better?
Yeah, I think the thing that's always just helped me throughout my life is I've never been perfect, but I just have a voracious appetite to learn and improve. And so I'm always reading, I'm always hiring coaches, I'm always doing trips. Like for example, it's going to happen one of two ways. Either you can be proactive with it or you're going to do it when things get so bad that it forces change.
Yep.
That's what most of us do.
Yep.
A couple years ago, I got in a really bad personal situation. I went a little off the deep end. I was like, oh, I'm gonna go do. I did ayahuasca and ibogaine. I did
Oh,
like
he
every
went
single.
crazy.
Yeah, I really did. Like, but I was so desperate
Yeah.
that it forced me to move, and I didn't know what else to do because I just felt that desperate. So I'm not saying to go do that, but what I am saying is that if you keep trying to just make yourself the best version of yourself and personally develop, I think a lot of your issues will go away. Most of
Yep.
us, we're not willing to change and we know we need to, but we're not willing to. And then usually what happens is things just get to a point where it's very painful and then we change.
Yeah. You've got
So
leverage.
yeah, so I'm not perfect, and I don't have all the answers, but I have been very good at always asking for help and searching and finding. And if you do that long enough, you will come to the right conclusion, the right answer. And as I've made myself like a better person, I've tried to build myself up physically, financially, mentally. Like the things you want are easier to attract because that's what
Right.
people are after. So just keep building yourself up. Don't even like necessarily worry about going and attracting a bunch of girls and stuff. Pretty much in my 20s, that's all I did is just build myself up. And I just, kind of started dating recently, to be honest, and I'm in my early 30s. And you don't have to do it that way. But to me, I just wanted to actually have something of value to offer women and other people than just like, I'm young and decent looking. I wanted to
Right.
like feel like I had something I could bring to the table. So I would just really focus on building themselves up. And then as they do that, a lot of the stuff they want is going to naturally attract to them.
I want to just take a second to like really honor you. And I don't, for what it's worth, but um, you are very unique in your thinking. And I really just want to honor that because it takes a certain kind of person to be able to step outside themselves like that at your stage in life. And I love because the 20s, I always tell my kids, they're like, I don't know what my purpose is. I'm like, you're not supposed to fucking know. You're 20. Like, what do you mean you don't know? So I think the fact that you the fact that you understood enough to like go and discover who you are in your 20s and not go do, like a lot of them are married now, right? 27 guys are
Yeah.
married and they have no idea what the hell they're doing. So I
Yeah.
just want to honor like the fact that you actually are taking that time and have taken that time to really get to know who you are. Because the 20s are probably one of the worst decades, I would say, because it's a shit show. And
Uh,
I had kids at
uh,
like, listen, I had a kid when I was 20. Like what the fuck did I know? Like I knew nothing trying to run a business and like be, all the things. So I think it's beautiful that you've had given yourself that gift of the last, your decade to really kind of get to know who you are.
yeah.
It'll make you a stronger person. So that's
Yeah,
amazing.
and I think people just don't be so hard on yourself. Like I just for the last 2 years I was really hard on myself because people were telling me, you should feel this way and you should do this, and I just didn't though. And I
Right.
tried. I even remember I would hire coaches specifically trying to change how I felt. And as I kind of made peace with that and I'm okay with where I'm at, I actually feel way more peaceful because I'm just living my truth, and like it could change and I'm open-minded to change, but there's not anything in this life that's gonna just quote unquote make you happy, right?
Yep.
Like it's normal to want to be in a relationship and I think it's normal to want to make money, but coming from someone who's made a shit ton of money and coming from someone who's, has a very I'll just say I have a very wide network of women I could date and I have a lot of
Mhm.
opportunity. Like it's not getting that isn't going to fulfill you, right? The
Nope.
fulfillment has to come within. And I think like when you can get to that place and you're actually at peace with yourself and who you are, like all this other shit is just an added bonus. But
Yeah.
if you're not okay with who you are and like being by yourself, I really don't think adding more to your plate or adding a woman or anything is really going to make a big difference.
Yeah. You got to be happy. Like that was, I think I learned that in my 40s probably is I actually dig who I am and I'm excited about who I am and I'm happy to be around me. But it takes it takes sifting through a lot of bullshit and a lot of years of being told what you should do and you shouldn't do and all that stuff. So last question, what's sort of your big next crazy goal for your life, your business? What's the next like holy shit that's freaking you out and you're so excited but terrified also?
Yeah, so I'm ready. I've done a lot of revenue in the coaching space. We're like 115-ish million or something. So
Nice.
I got every award. I feel like I got every award and I hit every kind of benchmark, and I'm ready to kind of move into the next thing. So right now I actually have one tech company I purchased equity. I'm building another one, and my goal is I just want to, I want to go for 9 figures. I want to sell something for not
Amazing.
well, not make 9 figures in sales, but like I want to sell it for
Yeah.
9 figures. And it's great because it's scary. Like I feel anxious. I get kind of that same
Oh,
feeling
I'm
I have
there with you right
with
now. Yeah.
yeah, but I like growing, and so every time you kind of feel that way, that's usually a good sign you're going in the right direction. It's going to
Yep.
help me become a better leader. I'm going to have to learn how to hire better staff. I'm going to have to learn new skills. So right now, like I really just like business as a personal development vehicle. I really enjoy it because it really pushes me to be a better human being because you have to learn how to lead people. And
Yep.
usually, at least my perspective is people don't want to follow someone they don't want to be like. So
Yep.
that's why you have to develop because otherwise people are like, I mean, why
Why
should
would
I
I
listen?
listen to you? Yep.
Exactly. And so a lot of the people I look up to, I want to be like them. And that's
Right.
why I look up to them. And so I'm just trying to continue to use business as a personal development vehicle so I can become the best person I can be.
That's amazing. Yeah. If you don't want to trade lives with the person you're listening to the wrong person.
Yeah, no point.
Period. There's like that's it's not any more complicated than that, everybody. Well, thank you, my dear. It was lovely chatting with you. And again, like for the insight, because I usually it's guys that are married or older that are on the show that talk about this stuff. And I love your perspective on it because it's different than most men your age. So I appreciate it. But and I will put all the notes and everything in the podcast episode and how to find you and all your deets if anyone and you're so if people want because you're a coach first now, right? So if people want to come coach with you, how would they do that? Is
Yeah,
it not
probably,
with you, I know, but with your people?
yeah, yeah. Probably best way is just message me on Instagram. So Tanner.Chidester. Shoot me a DM and we'll just have a conversation. That'd be the best way.
Amazing. All right. Thank you so much. And we'll see you guys on the next episode.